Welcome back. Proteus is an excellent example of what happens when someone says, what if I sat down and made the best kind of generative module I could come up with? And I'm delighted to be able to use it in a video for you today because it's made by a good friend of mine over in California at Seaside Modular. And he's been working on this for quite some time and it's finally available. And I've had it for a few months and I've been using it. And I really like what it can do. So in today's video, we're going to explore this fun, unique, slightly quirky generative module and see what we can get from it. But first, let's take a listen to some examples of what I can do with Proteus. Okay, so what is Proteus and how does it work? Well, at the heart, it is a random melody generator, and the length of the melodies can be up to 32 steps long, and you adjust the length of the internal buffer using this length knob. Red goes from 1 to 8, then we go up to yellow, light blue, and then green up to 32 steps. So let's just go all the way back to 8 steps here by putting it there. Now, what does that mean? That means whatever melody is being generated, a sequence of notes and triggers will loop back after 8 triggers on the incoming clock. Proteus doesn't have its own clock. You need to send it a clock via the gate in here, and it sends a gate output and a volt per octave output, which I'm going to patch into pizza here as our oscillator voice, into Akari for some filtering, and then on into my mixer. I've also got a bit of drums going on over here from the LXR module, and it's all being sequenced out of palms over here in the corner. And for fun, and because I just got it, I've got Samarkand up here wired up as a sound effect for some fun delay action as well. Okay, so we've got this concept of a buffer. So if you're familiar with things like Turing machines or shift registers, you'll understand the concept of a sequence of notes or triggers moving through a buffer and being manipulated. But Proteus does it a little bit differently. It generates the notes into the buffer, and it does that in either response to when you press the new button, when you send in a trigger on the new input, or, and this is the fun part, when it runs out of patience. And Proteus can be a little bit impish in that it likes to change up your melodies every so often, and it does that by running out of patience. And you'll see it slowly run out of patience depending on the setting of the patience knob here. The color will slowly change and then flash, and you'll get a new melody. Don't worry if you don't want Proteus to go randomly changing your melodies. If you find something you like, you can save them. I'll show you how to do it later. And you can always adjust patience up to infinite there, or set the lock switch on locked, and then things won't change. The other nice thing is you can adjust the density of notes, which is how many triggers will occur in the buffer that's being generated, and that can be modulated. But the real fun comes from playing around with the scale, octave, mutate, and complex knobs down here. And these allow you to control the degree of randomness in the random melody being generated. And like all generative sequencers I've ever played with, a little goes a long way. If you get too crazy with all of the randomness, things get out of hand really fast. Okay, well, enough chitter-chatter about what the module can do. Let's look at it in action. So first of all, we're going to patch a clock in. And to keep our cabling tidy, I'm just going to take a clock here from Palms, and I'm going to patch it in here. Same clock that's going to the delays over there. Now, I'm just going to turn off all of the sound effects on my mixer here, I've also got some drums, but we won't play with the drums just yet. We're just going to keep it all nice and simple. And you hear the melody that's being generated now. We're sending the gates and triggers in here, and I can turn density all the way down. And in this case, we'll have no notes play, and then we might have 1 or 2 notes. And what's my length here? Let's go back to an 8-step sequence so we can see the density more clearly. The green LED shows you where's the first step, so you know where you are. And right now we only have a trigger on the 1st and the 8th. But if I turn up density to noon, here we get more. And you see, very interesting how things can suddenly get. So by playing around with the relative density to the number of triggers, we can create very interesting kind of grooves. And of course, we could modulate that. Say we took a slow wave out of Batumi here. I'm just going to patch it through this bass-out modulator here so that it isn't quite the full range. We're going to modulate density. And now our little melody is evolving. This is getting interesting. We didn't have to do anything. Now, right now, patience is up on infinite, so it won't actually go and modify this. Now, say we really like this and we want to save it. So let's just quickly look at saving. We have 4 little slots here we can save in. If they're illuminated, that means something is saved in them. So you see all 4 illuminated. Let's say I want to clear one of them. I'll clear the second one here. Just long press the button. And then it goes clear, and now I've erased what was there. It's gone completely, no backup, so be sure you know what you're doing. Press the button, and then it's saved again. So now if we listen, I could load a new one by pressing, say, the first button. Totally different pattern has gone loaded. Let's go back to where we were by pressing the second button. So loading and saving, very, very straightforward. Let's just move this out of the way for a second so we can see a few other things we can play with. Notice how the notes were sort of quantized, and that's from this scale setting here. So I can choose 8 built-in scales. I've major, minor, harmonic minor, major fifth, minor fifth, and so on. And then you get 8 user-defined scales. The LED here, goes up from red to orange, and these are user-defined scales which you can program in using a web-based editor. So if you're into microtonal music and you like getting off the standard Western scale and doing microtonal or non-Western style tunings, this is great for that because you can load Scala files in or scale definitions. Let's just go back to harmonic minor again and take a look at the effect this has. So if I go to major, straight away it re-quantizes. Minor, harmonic minor. Now, what if I want to transpose the notes being generated? Well, there are 2 ways of doing that. First of all, obviously you can take the output and you could scale it, but then you lose the quantization. There's also a setting option in that GUI I showed you earlier where you can set the default root note of the output. By default, it is C3, but say you wanted it lower, you could set it to a different value. But say I want to quantize and transpose at the same time. So I'm going to patch into the transpose input here. Just take the output here of this first channel on Lapsus, patch that in there. This is set to a unipolar mode, so I'm going to get 0 volts down here. That means no transposition. As you can hear now, it goes up. But of course, I'm now going way high. So I might just want to actually limit the amount of output here. Clear out the wave folder there. Of course, we can always patch an LFO in there. And things get a little bit crazy very quickly. Send that off into our effects. Playing around with the FM index on pizza, such a great oscillator. Short little pluggy envelope there, built using the built-in envelope in VCA. And for things like this, you could bring a drum in. That's kind of how I've been using Proteus. I've just been playing around getting these fun little melodies out of it, and next thing you know, I've stumbled upon a cool little kind of groove that I'm able to build things around, be it a bass line or a lead line for something like we're doing here, especially through a bit of effects. It becomes really, really fun and interesting. Okay, let's take this patching out because I want to show you a few more of the things we can do here. Now, I've generated a new melody using Mutate and complex all the way down. Let's take a listen to what it sounds like. This is a 10-step melody just to keep things a little interesting. You hear it's quite simple. Like, I can turn the density down so we can listen to it a little bit. And you notice that some of the gates being generated are a little longer than others. There's an option to actually have this generate the gate, so if a step is followed by rest, you get a longer gate for a more interesting melody. Let's turn up the complexity to noon. Now nothing happens because it only takes effect when I regenerate the melodies. Let's take a listen. I'll turn up density now. Obviously it's a different melody because we've regenerated it. There's little runs now, little up and down runs. Great for bass lines. Now the relative jump, how much up and down goes, is controlled by the octave here. So here I had octave at about, I don't know, 10 o'clock. Let's say I turned octave all the way up. That would mean it's much more likely the notes will jump up and down more octaves, and it only ever goes a certain octave range. Now, notice how the relative up and down amounts are much greater now, because we've dialed up octave and generated a new melody. You can turn complexity all the way down. We still get a little bit of up and down going on. What happens if we have octave and complex all the way up? And this creates the most complex melodies because now Proteus is using its own internal logic and some mathematics about how melodies relate to each other to create very different runs, very different kind of progressions. Now, Mutate is another interesting knob to play with. And remember, all of these can also be CV controlled. So if we wanted to put them under modulation from Batumi here, we could, but we'll just look at them manually for now. Mutate controls the relative probability a single note will get mutated or changed each time through. So right now with mutated 0, we're getting the same pretty predictable melody each time. It's not very interesting. Let's turn up Mutate and turn off the lock switch. Now notice how it changed there. Do you hear the little change? And again it changed. Because we now have increased the probability of mutating notes. Let's turn it all the way up. And if a note's going to change, it goes pink. Now, I find if you have it at the extremes, things can get out of hand pretty easily. So I don't tend to keep it at those extremes. I tend to have these more in the sort of the mid-ranges. Now, we haven't looked at the last two knobs here, which you'll notice are sleep and patience. What do they do? Well, I mentioned at the start that Proteus can run out of patience and may, at that point, generate a new melody itself. Up till now, we've either been pressing the new button here, loading a melody from a pattern bank, or sending in a trigger into the new CV input. So if we turn patience down to a much lower value, and let Proteus just play away, you'll see, it's a little hard to see on this camera here, but the colors are changing, and at a certain point Proteus is going to run out of patience, the light will flash, and we will just get a new melody out of it. There you go, there was a flash, and now we have a new melody. Now if you like the melody, just press the lock switch, and it's locked, and now patience doesn't have any effect. but also some of the other modulation may not actually behave the same way. So if you want to modulate things externally, leave it unlocked, but turn patience all the way up to maximum. Now, what does the sleep node do? That adds a set of triggers up to a certain amount, which allows you to just sort of pause, not generating any triggers. So, for example, if I had this set to, say, length 14 steps, I could set sleep to 3, 1, 2. That's set to 4, 8. So we can add a little delay at the end of it, measured in the incoming clock. And it can create some interesting kind of counterpoint. You know, we play something and then we have a little pause. Lets it stand out a little bit interesting. Oh, we just changed it, of course, because patience. We ran out of patience unexpectedly. I'll do that myself then. Now, one thing we haven't looked at is this second switch here, and that, if it's down, is just the mode we've been in up to now. I'll just move this trigger out of the way, this cable out of the way so we can see it. If I push it to up, we're now in settings mode, and the settings are all very well explained here in the manual. And when we're in settings mode, the silver text here, it's underneath some of the knobs, allows you to change some of the parameters, and the buttons are toggle switches. So, for example, this is the toggle switch to toggle on and off quantization. The length now, when you're in settings mode, sets the gate length, so you're allowed to change it to much longer or shorter gates. Another thing we can do is we can slew notes by pressing option button 2 here, and then turning the slew amount. You hear there how it slews between notes. Let me just turn down the delay here so we can hear it a little bit more clearly. You hear the slew going on there between those two notes. That happens because I have slew and the slew amount turned on, and I've also enabled slew, the second button here in the settings bank. If I turn that off, slew goes away, and we get step changes between the notes. Just another feature that's available to you to allow you to change up your melodies. Now, you might be wondering what happens when I load a melody off the pattern bank, but the knobs don't correspond to what they were at when they were saved. If we go into our settings mode again, I'll just turn back on that setting there. This one is the usual one I leave on as well. This is called preserve melody parameters, which means it will save all of the knob settings with the melody into the save slot. And until the knob catches the new value, nothing will happen. So when you load it, it will sound the exact same as it did when you saved it. If you don't have this turned on, as soon as you load something, it will respond to the current settings of the knobs. Now, maybe that's what you want, and that's good. If you want that, just be aware that as soon as you load something, whatever is set here is going to apply to the melody that was loaded out of that save slot. I leave it like this just so it sounds exactly the same, so I know what I'm getting when I load it. Well, I hope you found today's video useful. I've certainly enjoyed playing around with Proteus and having fun exploring how to use it to make all sorts of crazy melodies, bass lines, techno-y sounds. If you found today's video useful, please let me know down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can keep up to date with the channel. If you have any questions on what I covered here or on any other videos, please do let me know in a comment down below. Thanks for watching. Let's just have some fun jamming.